Looks like the Russians could be in trouble. Russia highly likely behind drone incursions over U.S. American bases in England, report concludes. So the findings by the IISS research organization are part of a larger look into Russia's role in drone incursions sweeping Europe since 2024. All credit to thewarzone.com. So back in November of 2024, the Warzone broke a story about a series of incursions over U.S. bases in England by drones of mysterious origin. If you don't know what an incursion is, it just basically means an aircraft that's unidentified, at least that is where it's not meant to be, right? While the source of these unmanned aerial vehicles does not appear to have been officially determined, a new report suggests that it were actually launched by Russian ships. So, produced by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, or IISS, the report investigated a spate of drone incursions across Europe that began back in August of 2024 and found that is highly likely that the Kremlin conducted a UAV campaign over Europe. We assess it is likely that Russian-linked vessels in the Shadow Fleet were used as launch and recovery platforms for UAVs as part of the Kremlin's wider unconventional war on Europe, the report added. So, investigators rely heavily on circumstantial evidence and open source information, so we can't really independently confirm these findings, which offer new insights, if not concrete answers about who could have been behind the flights, but the drone incursions over the American bases in England were first to find out about in Europe and investigated by the IISS. Around the same time, there were also flights over Ramstein Air Base, or Ramstein Air Base in Germany. So drones of an unknown origin were first spotted over RAF Lakenheath, and then over RAF Fairford, RAF Feltwell, and RAF Mildenhall. So the report makes a particular note of the importance of RAF Lakenheath, which is now ready to host nuclear weapons. So a public appeal for info drew roughly 170 reported sightings, about half of which were deemed credible, either corroborated by multiple witnesses or backed by imagery that couldn't be explained away as ordinary air traffic. So operational security appeared sophisticated, IISS said. The UAVs entered the airspace around the RAF bases at low altitude with their lights visible and departed at higher altitudes. Arrival and departure directions varied across the incident period. Witness reports indicate more than one platform type might have been involved. The report says some observations were consistent with multi-rotor UAVs, other with fixed-wing platforms. The proportion noise of the UAVs were inconsistent across accounts, with some people who saw them describing sounds more typical of petrol engines than electric motors. Notably, the Dolphin, or HAV Dolphin, a vessel later linked to a 2025 drone incident in Germany, happened to be docked in the UK at the time, the investigators found. So that vessel was one of many either operated by Russia as part of its so-called Dark Fleet or Shadow Fleet of sanctioned ships, or those connected to Russia that the report goes into great detail to link to drone incursions throughout Europe after the incidences at U.S. Bases there. The report describes these vessels as Russian-linked commercial vessels, including Shadow Fleet tankers, coastal freighters, and smaller crafts. So the IISS suggested that the Russian Orlan 10 drone could have been one of the platforms used during the incursions. Orlan 10, a compact multi-purpose UAV in service with Russian armed forces since 2010, has a range and payload profile consistent with standoff standoff collection against coastal and inland targets, and fits the deck space of a mid-sized commercial vessel. So commercial specifications for the platform, including those published by Russian geospatial firms using the Orlan 10 for civilian aerial survey operations, document an operational range of 500 kilometers, endurance of up to 12 hours, and speeds up to 90 to 130 kilometers per hour. Performance parameters consistent with maritime launch from a vessel operating well beyond visual detection range of the European coastlines in question. Moreover, the Orlan 10's power is an internal combustion engine, a detail that may be relevant in light of witness accounts from 2024 situations at RAF Lakenheath, where propulsion noise was described by some observers as more characteristic of petrol engines than electric motors, typical of consumer and FPV first-person view drones. In addition, the Orlan 10's available payloads include a satellite navigation spoofing module and a global system for mobile communications network monitoring module alongside optical and thermal sensors, indicating the Orlan 10 family has active electronic warfare capability as well as passive ISR and observation. The Orlan 10 has been widely used as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drone by Russia in its ongoing war against Ukraine. Given that, however, using it for a clandestine operation, stealth operation, like this seems very strange and weird. The report critically recognized this, stating the use of identifiable Russian UAV platforms carries inherent attribution risk. So it's just weird. An alternative and operational credible hypothesis is that commercially available or modified platforms were used precisely to preserve deniability, including long-range FPV systems, home-built fixed-wing aircraft, or commercial UAVs modified to use cellular rather than radio frequency communications. The think tank acknowledges that its maritime launch hypothesis rests on a convergence of opportunity, demonstrated capability, and a consistent geographic pattern, but no European government has yet publicly tied a specific Shadow Fleet vessel that is Russian to a specific incident, despite officials suggesting privately that they could. The rest of this report treats the maritime UAV link as the most plausible explanation for where and when the incidences occurred, while acknowledging that confirming it will require evidence that isn't yet public. So this is not the first time Russia was accused of being behind the drone incursions, because back in February of 2025, last year, the UK-based the iPaper made similar allegations in its investigation. However, they suggested the flight could have been carried out by Russian operators on the ground. That investigation spurred some politicians to call forth for investigation, but less clear are results from investigations into other three bases involved. So, basically, the IISS report does not go into any of the cases outside of Europe. It does, however, clearly point that the finger is pointing at Russia as the culprit behind the drone overflights that have been plaguing Europe recently, in recent years, past 5 years of just about, including U.S. American bases in England as well as Germany. Thank you guys very much for watching. Subscribe, especially if you are new. Ring the bell, that way you don't miss any video I post in the future. Smash the like button, a thumbs up really helps me out, pushes my videos to new people. Check out my older content on the channel as well, and as always, you've been watching Everything Weapons. See you guys in the next video. Take care.